Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us from across the globe. Thank you for joining our webinar, The New B2B Sales Imperative. I'm your host, Zirwa Abbas, PR Manager at xiQ. A few housekeeping items before we begin. We'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question, please feel free to send it through the Q&A channel at the bottom of your player. We'll be answering your questions at the end of the session. Today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session and is accessible through registering on the website. Lastly, we'd encourage you to share this webinar within your social networks. I'll now hand it over to Lois Mueller, Director of Enterprise Sales at xiQ. Lois is a versatile results-driven professional with expertise in sales, marketing, and management of high-impact business initiatives. Lois will be moderating the session.
Thank you, Zirwa, and I'm glad to be moderating. Whenever I ask one of our prospects how the last year treated them and their respective businesses, the answer often begins with a pause. And at times it's a very long, silent pause. And I can tell you that what's happening in this pause is a recollection of that fight or flight response. They're thinking about the ways they had to pivot and change their methods to win more deals, or in the eyes of the marketer, they might have had an extra dose of epinephrine kick in because suddenly more eyes were on them than in the past. A lot of executives said, hey, our field marketers and sellers are no longer client facing and out in the field. So what can you do to increase our brand awareness? So while a lot of scary scenarios and change is thought of in these silent pauses, the voice I hear after when they start speaking again has truly been incredible. And what I mean by this is these 2020 fight or flight responses have quickly birthed groundbreaking new systems and behaviors when it comes to selling and marketing. We are now seeing more publishings about the hybrid seller. 2020 could be thought of as the inauguration of the CRO, and RevOps strategy is now too becoming a sought after initiative. So to further enhance our knowledge on the sales trends of 2021 and the new B2B sales imperative are Greg Downum and Usman Sheikh. And a quick introduction. Greg is an innovative sales operations and support leader at NTT DATA with experience in sales and people management in the technology and services industry. He is known for his ability to produce solutions with strong interpersonal negotiation and problem-solving skills and possesses a stellar execution of sales and operational objectives. Usman Sheikh is the founder and CEO of xiQ, which is a next-generation AI-powered SaaS platform for B2B sales and marketers. And throughout his career, Usman has held leadership positions, in product management, sales enablement, and digital commerce globally at companies like SAP. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Lois. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Greg. And then, Greg, I would love to pose the first question to you, and it's kind of an adaptation of how I started today's introduction. In your eyes, how has B2B sales changed?
Well, Lois, my pause is not so much a pause as it's more of a deep breath. To say that 2020 was a very traumatic year for B2B sales is really an understatement. However, we really can't get into the discussion on how B2B sales changed recently without first mentioning the accelerant of that change, and that would be the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has really affected all of us personally. Now, the pandemic has really forced a lot of buyers and sellers to go digital in a very abrupt and massive way, which has impacted existing supply chain models globally. It really has been an eye-opener just to realize how much we truly are a global economy and how we've all been impacted personally and professionally by the pandemic. It's changed the way the B2C landscape is concerned, as consumers who once shopped in person at their favorite brick and mortar establishments, they do find themselves using online delivery services more and more like Amazon and DoorDash. I've also noticed that when I go to the doctor, that I'm seeing fewer patients in the waiting room as there are less seats available due to social distancing requirements. And I, like many others, we now have the option to conduct my doctor visits through the use of telehealth visits from my laptop at home. We're also engaging in more virtual interactions with friends and family and our social circles, as well as with our team members due to restrictions on gathering in person as well as travel lockdowns. Now, all of these changes in our personal lives and how we interact on the B2C level, it all rolls in and over into the business model. Now, the change on B2B sales has equally been impactful. Now, granted, the business community, it has been steadily moving towards more digital services and products for the past several years. But the pandemic has really forced businesses to move at light speed this past year in order to be more agile and competitive in today's changing environment. We're also experiencing a surge in customer demand for digital solutions to not only efficiently meet demand, but also how their clients prefer to digitally buy and interact with them. Case in point, McKinsey Consulting, they did a study back in October of 2020, just a few short months ago. In their study, they discovered that approximately 70 to 80% of business-to-business decision makers, they actually prefer remote human interactions or digital self-service. Now, that's a big change in the way we were doing business with many of our enterprise customers just a year ago. Many of the times we were walking the hallways and having a lot of those face-to-face visits, doing a lot of traveling and so forth. But the pandemic has really kind of changed that focus. Our clients are now telling us, hey, we've gotten used to this new way of doing business virtually. And we're definitely using a lot more of the digital content and the research and so forth. And on top of that, we also have a younger generation. They are filling those decision maker roles. And they're getting used to conducting their own research, and they are comfortable with using technology for everyday interactions, and even preferring it. So now our sellers, they're armed with more knowledge that might put them just maybe a little bit further in the buying process, but they now prefer to use more technology in remote interactions or in digital self-service altogether. This definitely requires a new approach to selling in a digital age, from the use of data and analytics and developing target accounts to real-time sales alerts that can lead to actionable opportunities, to customized content based upon curated industry news and trends. This also means a closer relationship between sales and marketing. Usually, they're very much two distinct organizations in the past. They kind of support each other, but with the new digital age, we really are going to be relying on them much more for the digital content and some of the action items that are coming out of that. So I will say that while we are experiencing extremes in B2B sales right now, having previously the luxury of walking those hallways to now only virtual visits, I do believe that we will adopt a hybrid approach over time, and that B2B sales will be conducted in person and virtually based upon client expectations, time, ease of meeting, and travel costs.
Absolutely. And Usman, would you like to elaborate on this question as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So totally agree with Greg about the transition from physical to virtual has not been as smooth as one would have expected, given the fact that we were all using Zoom even before the pandemic started. But in B2B, this has been fairly disruptive. The shift of being outside focused to inside focused has really disrupted the traditional sellers that were relying on picking up signals by walking the hallways, meeting people, taking them out for golf. Those have really been removed from the tools that I had to be able to understand and break through to my prospects and my clients. I like to call that analogy equivalent to going to a party, everybody's having a good time at the party, and suddenly the lights go off. Now, to navigate in this dark new landscape, you need to have night vision goggles. And artificial intelligence, as Greg was mentioning, he didn't mention the word artificial intelligence, but he did mention that research and technology is playing a full frontal role. AI is that game changer. And one of the other things, Greg, I noticed, and we've been noticing for a long time, is that there is tremendous amount of unstructured data that resides outside on the internet and in the public domain. The ability to tap into that data and make sense out of it starts giving us that night vision capability that helps us make decisions. So just to kind of summarize, physical to virtual is a big change. Inside to outside selling is a big change. A lot of people are shifting, and the role of sales is changing. I totally agree with you, Greg. It is going to be a hybrid approach once things settle down. But the CFOs have also noted that a lot of stuff can be done much more cost effectively and effectively, period, online, right? And lastly, the role of AI and technology. AI is a major game changer given the circumstances. So those would be my three big lowest changes. How about you? What have you noticed?
For me, double clicking on that hybrid role, and like I talked about in the opening as well, I think that now, since everyone has taken that deep breath, like you said, Greg, and taken a step back and has a year of analytics under their belt, they're really noticing how much more it costs to get new clients. It's anywhere from 5 to 25% higher versus your current clients and word of mouth. And so that's where that RevOps strategy comes in. It's saying, okay, now let's not just look at the hybrid role of the seller and marketer together, but let's also bring in client success and operations. And I want you three to work together and collaborate and say, who can we give white glove service to that we haven't yet? Are clients feeling the love? Are they feeling the appreciation? Do they know how powerful, like for us, our tool is? And then what can we do? So I really love the collaborativeness and teamwork that is coming together after 2020, especially when the pandemic did a really great job in pulling everyone apart and keeping you separate. So now that there's more collaboration than ever before, to me, that's kind of the warm and fuzzy feeling inside. And I'm excited to see that carry forward into this year and continuing onward. And so, Greg, you had talked about buyers and sellers now being armed with more knowledge and that they have to create actionable opportunities and situational, awareness. And so what would you say are some of the additional imperatives for successful B2B sales?
Well, before I get into that, I'm really glad that you mentioned RevOps, because I'm a big believer in RevOps. I really believe that the new selling model, it's really going to be a cross-team collaborative effort, more so than it ever has been in the past. And RevOps is usually the way to go about doing that in an organization. So, but getting back to the question on hand, what are the imperatives for what I think are successful B2B sales? I really think it revolves around three critical areas to be successful in today's B2B sales. I think that you really need to implement a data-driven sales process. Second thing is adding your inside sales skills, your social selling skills, and your virtual selling skills to your sales arsenal. And then thirdly, knowing your client or prospect and doing your research before you make that first contact. So what do I mean by implementing a data-driven sales process? Really, this is making heavy use of AI and analytics, as Usman said previously. We really have a lot more knowledge available to us, but we got to be careful about paralysis analysis and getting stuck with too much data out there. So that's where AI comes in there and plays a hand to help us to glean and determine which information is relevant and help us determine trends that's going on in the marketplace. So it's really helpful to employ that type of technology with your sales. In the past, experience and intuition-based selling were the things that were driving sales the most, but they really need to make way for data-driven selling as well in this new digital age. And really, if you're going to be successful in this ever faster moving world, sales teams need to be basing their decisions on data rather than just relying on instinct alone. So it's going to be a change, from outside to adopting these inside and virtual and social selling skills, and less on instinct. Sales and marketing teams, they also need to use data to make smarter decisions with that continual effort of optimizing their data driven sales process through analytical insights. By applying this to sales, companies and salespeople are going to understand what to focus on when and with what kind of messaging. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier on number 2, is to shake off that dust of your inside selling skills. I know that a lot of us that have been in sales started out in inside sales, learning how to sell, and we learned how to listen to our auditory cues and how to close business over the phone and be persistent. Since we're not able to go do the client-facing visits, we've got to kind of dust off some of those skills and bring those back around. The other thing is also know what the difference is between virtual and social selling and adopt best practices from both. They're two very different approaches, but they should also be very complementary of one another. So real quickly on social selling, it's something that will really utilize your peer-to-peer social networks. And what we're looking for is we want to create 3 types of events. The first one is trigger selling. We really want to create those conversations by triggering a client's impulses. Referral selling, we're doing that through social network to acquire new clients through consumer referrals, but also insight selling. You want to generate leads by being an influencer. And so we're seeing a lot of that take place in a lot of social media platforms today. The other thing is, get comfortable with virtual selling. Learn how to be more engaging with your clients over video. It really requires adopting those best practices for video presentations and good equipment. I know that sounds a little basic, but it's amazing how many times we get on calls with vendors and they've just got poor lighting, or their situation behind their head is distracting. There's also some other things that you can do about voice and sound. It's really important to have that good type of quality with engaging your client. But on top of that, really about what's important with virtual selling is tapping into your buyer's emotional intelligence. Be empathetic with your buyers. Connect on that human level with others who are experiencing the impact of the crisis. Virtual selling, it really, really demands active listening skills. A couple of other tips that you can include into that, you really consider the buyer's distractions, what's going on in their world today. Be unique in how you approach them with virtual meetings. We have sometimes we have virtual shared lunches or after-hour cocktails, and that we set our clients up with. So it really kind of makes it interesting and engaging, but it makes it also memorable in the client's aspect, especially since we can't do face-to-face visits anymore. The other thing is refresh your business acumen. That's a very important way to build that vendor to partner relationship. It's by providing some quick and accurate insights into the business environment, into their business environment, you can really gain the confidence in your buyers in lieu of building that in-person relationship. And thirdly, leverage your team-based selling. A lot of the virtual selling, it allows you to bring your colleagues into that buyer interactions who would otherwise not be available for some of those on-site discussions. That's kind of a big advantage today because we can get more people on the call, more experts and so forth, and it's easier to do the scheduling, less cost. Collaborate with those subject matter experts as well as with your managers and coaches and sales overlays who can now join that online conversation. It really represents a new set of competencies for you and really puts you in that trusted advisor role. Third thing is really learn how your clients prefer to be connected with. Just don't get into their firmographic data or their demographic data and who they are, what their businesses do. Really unlock their psychographic profiles as well. Everybody's got different personalities. They like to be approached differently through email and voicemail. Some are like to really get to know you personally. Some like to get straight to the point. By having the ability to do some of those psychographic profiles, it's really going to help you engage through your emails and your voicemails.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love what you said. I picked out the following in the new imperatives. First of all, Greg, when I went to finish the first sales training, they said, you've got 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that order. And that still holds true.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
A lot of the conventional wisdom of what has been done in B2B still stays intact. It's just the format and the venues have changed. So building trust, knowing that you're talking to people, and people are going to buy from people they trust, researching accounts, researching the individuals that you're selling to, getting to really uncover who they are, adopting that personalized approach. Be prepared and ever present, and be ever present. This is super, super important. You talked about trigger-based selling, and companies like Google or SAP or even NTT, they're generating 150 different sales triggers or opportunities to engage with different aspects of that company a day, right? It's just humanly not possible to filter through that and be able to realize, how and when to strike. So again, technology comes into play to help you do that. But what I found interesting, Greg, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, is this, and Lois, you mentioned this too, is collaboration and convergence of sales and marketing. We have always talked about, yes, there has, we've provided a lot of lip service in the past. Sales and marketing need to work together. But the fact of the matter remains that it hasn't happened. And I believe the ability to go virtual, as you said, the ability to schedule people so that they can come together on virtual, is the forcing function that is going to drive this convergence and collaboration. And teams where outreach, interpretation, and engagement can be unified are the ones that are going to really, really succeed.
Absolutely. And so, Greg, I think, and Usman, my next question double clicks on the ways in which AI is driving the new B2B sales imperative. I know you both have mentioned trigger selling, understanding your buyer, and the different ways that you can get assistance in doing this. But if you could just elaborate on specifically how AI is helping drive that imperative, that would be great.
Yeah, great point. I mean, just as the pandemic's been disruptive to our world, AI has also been disruptive in the way that we buy, sell, and market, but in a good way. And it certainly has been going on for a lot longer amount of time. It does give our sales and account-based marketers with some in-depth account insights and sales triggers for actionable opportunities. And you can really see as the sales teams and the account-based marketers work together, they are one team. They're helping to build that digital content. They're helping to build those triggers and provide, those triggers that are actually going to be generating opportunities. AI can help also identify client profiles in new marketplaces that we may never have investigated before. It helps to leverage buyer personas. We can also, inform us how to connect with each decision maker personally, as I mentioned previously. But it can also help our account-based marketing teams to really create that custom-based content based upon curated insights and industry trends that are important to our clients, rather than just sending out a generic message out to our client base. They're really customized and profiled to the individual themselves. And I think that's going to be huge, especially as we get more to the digital age. AI it's also can be informative of what your clients are researching through their intent data, what your clients think of you and what they think of your competition. But it can also improve salesperson retention and identifying, some of those sales personality traits that are needed to hire and better align sales talent with clients. But again, it's a lot of information, and you really need a good AI program and partner to help you work through that. Which is why I think it's very important to have that kind of partner that can help you curate that relevant information that really impacts your clients, that can help you identify the trends that are going on and their particular sub-industry. They can also help us engage on more personal levels and help us provide the latest contact data.
Yeah, Greg, we've been a big proponent of the fact that, and we've noticed this, and I'm sure you've also observed this, that since the start of the internet age, as we may call it, there's a lot of unstructured, extremely valuable nuggets of information that are scattered all over the internet. Speed and agility is paramount in being able to successfully sell in the B2B world. However, the ability to collect this in unstructured data, make sense out of that, and make it actionable has not been possible. So Lois, to your question as to how is AI driving the new B2B sales imperative, one of the first things it's doing is it's helping us analyze this immensely valuable but unstructured data that resides out of there and come up with things like the psychographics that xiQ provides or the sales triggers that we provide in real time. And that in turn gives sellers the ability to make these decisions clearly and valuably calculated decisions in real time. And that is a huge differentiation. The other thing that Greg, you mentioned was the emotional connection and the ability to connect with individuals. And now that we don't have the physical and it's going to be less so, and we're going to still spread out, and there's going to be more buyers in the buying group that's coming in and the decision-making group that's coming in. Again, tools that can collect this information and feed it into the sales makers can be extremely useful to help them build that emotional connection, as you were calling it, with their teams. So obviously we are an AI-based platform, so we firmly believe in it, but practically also we have seen with certain clients where they have adopted these tools, that the sales reps that have actually adopted these tools have an 18% to 25% higher win rate than the guys that have not. The other thing it does is that traditionally Salesforce have always had an A play set of small group of A players, a significant portion of B players, and then a number of C players. Tools like this actually help the C players become B players and the B players become A players, which collectively helps the the revenue, increases the revenue goals and helps drive their revenue goal.
Absolutely. And one thing I've noticed as well, because Usman, as you said, we use our own tool every day. And so I'm incredibly grateful to xiQ, but it also has boosted the confidence, which, like you said, turns C players into B into A, because you have to have confidence to sell. And oftentimes I would sit staring at a blank email to a C-suite or executive decision maker and not know where to begin or how to start because I didn't have that personal connection yet. And Greg, as you said, once you know the persona of your buyer and the personality type and what their preferred writing style is, like that just boosts your confidence instantly to say, okay, this is what they like, this is how I can structure this email. And without that AI assistance, like you said, you could continue to send generic emails that wouldn't land. You'd continue to get put into spam folders and not reach your audience. Whereas now AI is like bridging that gap and helping you link your outward momentum and your outward reach. So incredibly exciting, and I'm excited to see where not only xiQ continues to take it in the future, but other AI institutions as well. And that brings us to our last question of the day is, what are the must-have skills for future B2B sales makers? I know we talked about situational awareness, we talked about AI, adopting that as an institution in your outreach, but Greg, can you elaborate on the must-have skills?
Yeah, just to kind of go over some of the things that I mentioned earlier. I mean, really know how to effectively use your virtual tools and get comfortable using chat, the virtual whiteboards, the polls, breakout sessions, for make your virtual meetings dynamic, engage your customers, and use their time well. We do a lot of exercises on how to use the different features in whatever chat platform that you're using, but we really encourage you to use that and get comfortable with all the features and tools. The other thing is, get comfortable with engaging your clients over video. Research does show that a video call is much more effective in attracting and keeping participants' attention more than just a phone call. Invest in some quality equipment. I can't say that enough, such as lighting, camera, and a good headset. Make sure that you're coming through loud and clear. Make sure you've got appropriate lighting, because again, this is your first impression with the client many times, and you do put a face on it. It's better than a phone presentation, not as good as face to face, but it's our new reality. The other thing is work closely with your account-based marketers. Help them curate the digital marketing that's going out to your clients. You really are a team, and it takes more than just a salesperson to sell these days, especially in the new digital age. Leverage every tool that you have, leverage group, make everybody successful in your sales. And finally, the last thing is really get to know your clients. That means doing your research ahead of time. I can tell every time a vendor reaches out to me that I have never spoken with in the past, whether they have done their research through either their emails or through the voicemails that they're leaving me. The ones that I'm going to call back and make appointments with and schedule time are few and far between. But those that do, they've done the research. They know exactly what my pain points are. They've got some insights into how to improve things, and they know my personality type. The other thing is it's important to really, like Usman said and earlier, we've got to be empathetic when we're making those calls. Know how to engage their unique personality through email and phone, and video. But this again requires you to have good supporting data.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you said, both of you have said, is situational awareness. I refer to as being able to establish context and being contextual, being at the right time with the right information and saying the right thing. This is super, super important. And these are the must-have skills for the future B2B sales makers. Also, Greg, there's a whole lot of younger people that are coming that are already equipped with these skills. They're good on the video. They know how to post. They know how to be succinct. They've got great social selling skills. Maybe need to be polished a little bit. And I think that I always like to say that if I run a company always, as you know, and I like to have a blend of the silver-haired with the dark-haired guys, right? You've got to have the wisdom and the young people over there that are coming together. The young people have the energy, they have the creativity, they have the ability, they're thinking out of the box. I am amazed at the learning curve of some of these younger people, and they just need to be guided a little bit. That conventional wisdom that you and I have picked up, the two ears, two eyes, and one mouth, and using it in that order. Um, those are the things that we can provide. Those are the kind of training wheels that we can provide, and these guys can take off. Multiple channels, right? These guys are also, as you're saying, equipped. They're really good at finding people on social media, connecting with them, building that relationship, and doing it online. And that is really a strong skill to have. I think the out of the box thinking is, and the creativity around that, as you said, you got to keep it fresh. You can make these video calls extremely dynamic. And I must admit that my lighting right now is not very good. So I haven't done a good job at that. But nevertheless, making these calls exciting. And I remember when I used to be at SAP, there used to be a guy who used to run, the German guy who used to run a community. And he used to come and he had his organ that he used to play. He had his gong that he used to use. He used to bring so many props to the video call that it was like going to a show, literally. And while we were talking and something big happens, he's got his, organ going off, and he's got his gongs going off, and bells and whistles, literally bells and whistles going off. Lastly, what I would say is writing skills. This is a tough one, right? You want to be able to communicate, articulate, and writing skills, finding good writing skills within sales has been traditionally a channel. And this is where I would go back and say that, again, artificial intelligence can help by understanding the personality, making sure, I like to use the example of Star Trek, right? So if you remember the good old Star Trek, there used to be Captain Kirk, there used to be Spock, Uhura, and Scotty, and Bones. And if you look at Kirk had to make split session, life and death decisions in split seconds, right? This guy does not, he needs 3 bullet points, right? He needs just the most important information available to him so he can make that snap decision. Alternatively, Spock could, he likes to consume a lot of data. He can compute that data extremely fast. He's like our modern day AI. He can compute that data extremely fast and make decisions. Now, if we cross wires and we go to Kirk and we give him that, we do a major data dump, we're going to choke Kirk, and Kirk is not going to be able to make that split-second decision, life and death decision. Spock, on the other hand, if we went to Spock and just gave him those 3 bullet points, he won't believe it because he doesn't know what is the research that's been done behind it. What is the credibility that's been done behind it? So being able to communicate to the right person in the way they understand information and the way they ingest and interpret information is important. And that translates still into both verbal communication skills as well as writing skills. And today, there are tools that, of course, by understanding the psychographics, can also make recommendations as to, should you treat this person like a Kirk, or should you treat this person like a Spock? What do you think, Greg? So
absolutely couldn't agree more. Yep.
Yeah. What do you think about the writing skills, and is that a challenge you think in sales today?
Oh, it is. Sometimes I'll get an email from a salesperson that's trying to connect with me, and it'll be like 16 paragraphs long. I do not have time for that. Give me some bullet points, and they better be relevant. But again, that's just my personality type. And if you actually pulled my psychographic profile, you would see that, and it's actually listed there. It's kind of scary how you guys are able to determine that. But some other folks, and I like to get straight to business. Some other folks, like I said, they want to get to know the person first. But really, I'm more of a, let's get to the point. Same way with voicemails. I mean, you can just tell. So couldn't agree more. Yeah. Even though I'm a Star Wars fan more than a Star Trek fan, I like your analogy.
And the buying group is made up of multiple individuals, and I believe the psychographic information can work both ways in constructing that buyer group. So you need to have the people, you need to have the Spocks in there, you need to have the influencers who can create and motivate others, and you need to have the decision makers, the people that can pull the trigger. So it works whether subconsciously or now much more consciously in how you construct buyer groups. But for sales makers, because it's about B2B sales, for sales makers, you have to understand that there is a Spock and this person does need a lot of information. And there is a Kirk, as you are as well, and 16 paragraphs ain't going to do it, right? So you have to be succinct, get to the point, but you need to know who you're doing it with. And Greg, Gartner says 84% of deals in B2B are lost because sellers cannot connect or win the trust of their buyers, right? And the number one reason is I'm not communicating, I haven't done my research, and I don't know who that person is. And that physical distance has only made it that much more difficult.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a big gap, and it's a big challenge for people today to sell that way. But again, doing your research ahead of time will certainly really put you ahead of your competition and give you that edge that they don't have.
Correct.
Well, thank you both so much. Zerwa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we are going to open the Q&A session shortly. So if you have any questions from the audience, please feel free to drop them in the chat or Q&A box.
Yes. Thank you, Greg and Usman, for your input and insights today. It was a very enlightening discussion. Everyone, the floor is now open for questions. You can use the Q&A chat box appearing on your screens to post your queries. We do have a few that have come in during the presentation. Andrew says, what are your 3 best tips for B2B sellers who are struggling with this transition from outside to inside sales? Greg, would you want to take a lead on that?
Absolutely. Outside to inside, or inside to outside sales and vice versa. That is a challenging approach. I don't care from what side of the fence that you're starting on. Really, it's just getting through it, getting on the phone and making those calls. If you're in an outside role and you're having to get back on the phone today, just know that you're going to have to improve your technique over time. It's not a technique that comes naturally. Talking to people, listening to what they're saying, listening for those auditory cues is very important. But you got to learn how to get past the gatekeepers as well. That's a challenge in and of itself. Do your research ahead of time. Make sure that you've got something that they're going to be interested in hearing within the first 10 seconds. Making sure that you know what is really going on in their industry. Just don't come with some topical things that you've seen. You've got to really know what's being applied to them.
Like you said earlier, Greg, dust those cobwebs off, right? Go back
That's right.
to your basic instinct. I know when I made the transition to these video calls, I found my old communications and public speaking book on the back of my bookshelf, and I literally took my finger and had to wipe the dust off. So when you said that, I couldn't help but laugh on the inside.
Well, it's funny. I mean, and face-to-face visits, you can get a lot of face cues of what's going on. You can see, if you've got a large chat room like this, you may not be able to focus on every person in the graphics that you got in the screen, but usually in a room, you can actually pick that up and see what's going on, but with a lot of body language. But video makes it a little bit more challenging, not as challenging as phone sales, but you still got to pick up the auditory cues that you may not have been using for a while.
Absolutely. And if I may elaborate on that question from Andrew Zerwa, Greg, everything what you said is so motivational to me as well. But then I'd say also make sure you're organized. I think success stems from the root of organization. And so like you just said, when you're out in the field, you have these cues that you can take and then you can nurture the sale that way. But when you don't, you have to have everything buttoned up and in line prior to that video and that next call. And if you don't have that, I think that's a really great starting point as well.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm not a big fan of just picking up the phone and dialing and calling and then dialing another person. You really need to do that research. You need to have a tactical approach to approaching your client. Because like I said, they can tell when you're not prepared. They can tell when you don't know anything about them. I don't have time to deal with people. I don't have time to train you on me and my business. That's your job.
Absolutely.
Kind of blunt, but.
Well, you told us that's your personality type, so we shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's, I think, gold right there, what you just said. Fantastic advice. What else do we have, Zirva?
Thank you. The next question is from Matthew Kingston. Matthew says, B2B buyers expect to work with partners who understand their realities and can solve their biggest pain points. How does AI help sellers in this regard?
Maybe I can go first on this one.
Sure.
So again, I'll go back to the fact that there's so much information out there, people. There's companies are generating a lot of information. It's on social media. It's just difficult to get to. So AI can be this extra augmented, instead of artificial, this augmented intelligence that helps you get to find and understand what you need to say and to whom and how to say it. So uh, the understanding the pain points today, I'll give a great example, Greg. So before, before 2020, the traditional way for getting prepared for these large deals was to go and look at the 10K filings and the annual reports. And then came COVID. And everything that was in the annual report and in the 10K filing suddenly was not valid anymore. Goals had changed, the way business was being done was changed, everything was changed. So how do you make the transition? And this is where AI can come in, because it's essentially really harvesting the news and the information of what companies are doing to tackle and address the disruption caused by the coronavirus and the pandemic. And what are the companies doing? This now becomes your new reality. This becomes your guiding points. And where are they saying it? They're saying it on YouTube. So executives are going on social media. Companies are putting it out in investor relation guides. They're saying it again on social media and in videos. They're telling you blow by blow how things, play by play, how things are evolving. And humans just do not have the capability to focus on collecting this information, which is continuously changing and interpreting it. And AI can help you come and understand what's happening. It can help ingest a lot of this information, churn it out into actionable recommendations. So I would say AI is a great help for sellers today, especially where everything is, the apple cart has been upturned, and we need to figure out how to move next. And those sales makers, as you said, Greg, don't approach me when you don't know who I am and what my business is. That consultative sale is dead, right? It's not going to work where I come in and say, well, how do you guys do this? And how do you guys do that? That's my recipe for turning my prospect or my client off. However, if based on the research that I've done, which has been again abbreviated and accelerated due to augmented intelligence, I can now go and actually provide helpful recommendations and guidance and really become a value-added intelligence partner, information partner to my client. And that's how we start building trust in these virtual rooms and these virtual environments.
Well said, Usman. I mean, in business-to-business sales, we're not looking for vendors. We are looking for partners. I think that was the way the question was posed. We're looking for those people to put into that trusted advisor role. A vendor is just going to sell your product and move on to the next thing. Business to business sales, they need people who know their business, who can provide them with insights on what's going on in the industry and give them really good insight and valuable information on where to take their business and how to solve their problems. And to stay with the company. It's a long-term relationship that we're building here.
Yeah, last question, and if I may just, there's a few questions, and but human intel will always have an upper edge. Why AI is still an area to bank upon? I think we've kind of answered it a few times. Things have changed, very fast pace of change. You need to be able to grapple with that and grab it and understand. What would you guys say?
I'd say the same thing. It's the speed of change. And Usman, as you mentioned so eloquently earlier, humans are just not equipped to handle speed of change that much, which is why we really need to adopt more of that data-driven sales process. And I'm not saying that intuition selling should go away, but they need to work together, and you need to make room for data-driven analysis. Ultimately, it's going to be a combined approach.
And then when it comes to efficiency as well, I mean, AI should still be an area in which you're banking upon and investing dollars in, because with the amount of data that's out there, you need AI to point you in the right direction, to spark those triggers, to turn on the next deal. So I think it's definitely something that you should continue to keep in your tool belt.
I will add one more thing to that, which is that you both talked about it. the convergence of sales and marketing. You've got to have that closed loop system in place. We cannot be operating in a fragmented, fractured, obsolete MarTech base. It's expensive, it causes delay, and there's a lot of insights that fall through the cracks. So we have to rethink, and I think that big pause that you talked about also happened at the CMO, CRO, CSO level. They sat back and said, what are we doing? How can we start to rethink the process end to end? And so we are a big advocate for the fact that there has to be collaboration. And in order for that collaboration to work, you have to have a unified end-to-end platform in place where you can seamlessly go back and forth between sellers, marketeers, RevOps people, and growth intelligence experts, specialists that are helping sales teams today as well. So that one unified block, looking at it end to end, and the sales process is no longer just the sales process. It's also, it starts very early. It's like when you start influencing, the first awareness letter that goes out or information that goes out to clients and prospects, that's where the sales start, and it eventually concludes with a deal, and actually even goes into client success post the deal as well. And so to run this cycle, you cannot afford to be running it across 20 different systems. You've got to streamline.
Do you think we have time for one more?
Sure. This last one, then absolutely last.
Yes. Elizabeth is asking, do outside sales teams use different tools than inside sales teams? Greg, would you like to answer that?
As far as research tools, is that what you're referring to? Obviously, they use different skill sets when approaching clients, but as far as tools, I think they all have access to the same research tools for the digital age, but it really depends on their skill set. It does take a different type of skill set for outside sales versus inside sales. Tools, other than just having the ability to purchase a travel ticket and a phone, that would be the biggest thing. But in today's world, you got to combine. It's you got to adopt those virtual selling skills and really get to use comfortable with the tools that we've got today as far as your video with your headsets and things like that. So hope that answers your question, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Greg, I hear you saying this, and I think that you are pointing towards the new next generation sales makers as being a hybrid. They're marketeers and they're sellers. It's no longer that this is that sales qualified lead being or marketing qualified lead being handed to the salesperson. It's you have to have the ability to go upstream to be able to create that interest, and you have to have the sales skills to be able to engage and then convince and move them through, influence and move them through the different steps. So that to me, I think is very interesting. Maybe you can say, is that something that you're observing? And is that the trend that we are seeing, Greg, where we see that the next generation sellers, the new breed that's coming up, actually exhibit both skills and must have both skills? Would that be a correct statement from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it would, absolutely, especially for the younger generation that's coming up. Because an important part of your tool belt in sales is make sure that today you've got to have that social selling skills. And that's marketing yourself and promoting yourself, not directly to your client, but indirectly, that generates some results and really puts you in that professional and expertise role in their eyes. Because like you said earlier, they are going out to YouTube, they are going out to LinkedIn, they're going out to product and client reviews. They're doing their research ahead of time. And if you are a one who's out there, who's providing your insight, not just to them directly, but what's going on in the industry, you're going to be that more valuable asset. They're going to be more willing to talk to you. And I really think that the ones who are coming up into the decision maker roles today, they do a very good job at doing that research, but also in the sales, they do a very good job of promoting themselves socially. And I think that's something that you really need to have across the board.
Beautiful.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. That's all the time we have for questions today. We've received more questions and we'll try to address as many as we can over emails and phone calls. For the latest updates on B2B sales and marketing, follow us on LinkedIn. You can also follow the link in the chat to download the xiQ app from App Store or Play Store. You will receive a recording of this session in your mailboxes within 48 hours. And if you have any questions or want to learn more, you can log onto our website, xiqinc.com, and schedule a free consultation with us. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Greg.
My pleasure.
Greg,
Thank you for
that
having me today.
Yeah, Greg, that was phenomenal. I think on behalf of the audience, and this is going to go out to many more people who were registered and will be posted. I think those were extremely sage and astute business advice that you shared with the audience. And I truly appreciate that. There's a lot of wisdom in there, a lot of good learning. I learned a lot in today's session, and you did definitely, show us what the pros are actually doing today in this new environment. So thanks a lot for your appearance and coming over here. Thank you to Lois.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Bye.